The world got itself a new affordable integrated bracelet watch, this time from Christopher Ward. To some that would garner a meh, but I'm here to argue that this is a more important release and one that you should sit up and take notice of. The people that look at this watch and say meh have some legitimate criticisms, and I'm going to go through all of them, but not to agree with them, but rather to challenge the reasoning, because I actually think this is a pretty good watch. Of course they are. It's a $2,000-ish watch. If you put this watch side by side with a Rolex Submariner or an AP Royal Oak, it's going to fall flat on its face. This is a watch where you have to use that phrase that I sometimes don't like, and that is, for the price. Of course, you can't expect a sub $2,000 watch to have a hand-finished movement, intricate 5811 style two-part case construction, and precious metal applied detailing. That's not going to happen. Price and quality do still correlate quite clearly. But when you say for the price, this is actually pretty good and probably better than you would usually get at this price point. The movement is a Sellita SW200 or SW300 in the titanium model. You get either 38 or 56 hours of power reserve, and in the top of the line titanium model, you get a COSC certified movement. The SW200 is a movement you'll find in the likes of the SIN 556, Aurus models, and Bremont models. Is it an in-house movement like a Nomos? No, it isn't. But it is a solid workhorse movement found in similarly priced and more expensive watches. CW has also gone through the time of finishing the rotor and movement to make it look distinctive, with a mix of black, the CW logo etched as a pattern on the rotor, and a rough brushing on most of the other components. It's a good movement where they put some time and effort into spiffing it up. The bezel has 3 finishings: sandblasted, brushed, and mirror polish. That's something that drives up costs, and it's not easy to do even with a CNC machine router. The bracelet links have brushed and polished components, beveling on the edges, and a seamless bracelet closure. The dial is textured and dimensional, which is something you don't see often in watches in this price range. You'll often find flat dials, sometimes you'll find sunray, and for the lucky few, you may come across some pattern dials. With the CW, you get this raised textured surface, plus a flat railroad track on the outer rim of the dial. The date window is also color matched. The markers are applied and not painted on, and in another feat of attention to detail, you note that all the text is carefully placed on the dial without flattening the texture of the dial surface. Check out a SIN 556 or a Nomos Club or a Yema. There's just so much more technique that has gone into the production of the CW that hasn't gone into those other watches. Could the other producers probably do it? Yes, but they didn't. Short version, you are getting a lot of intricate finishing techniques and a high level of construction complexity for a watch in this price point. It's actually quite impressive what they've managed to pack into this package. We pay our respects to Omega, Blancpain, and Patek and the like, in part because they've been around for ages. The respect or kudos that comes with decades of producing icons and movement innovations is well deserved. CW has none of that. Christopher Ward has only been around since 2004. That's hardly enough time to build a storied heritage. Christopher Ward has also been one of those new online-only startups delivering an alternative to the established watch brands. For a long time, this was a brand that pushed out some decent, affordable dive watches and other watches that were, I suppose, fine, not exceptional, not bad, and if you liked them, then cool, but they were not something that stole headlines. To be fair, they were not one of those cut out of the middleman type watch companies that sourced everything from China. They were real producers of watches, but they were not necessarily broadly accepted to be a producer of something worth taking note of in general. Some people knew they were good all along, but for many, they were just there. That's not the case anymore though. The lack of cred associated with not being a brick and mortar flagship store, heritage Swiss producer of watches is something that CW have shed over the past couple of years. For me personally, it happened before the Bel Canto. But the Bel Canto was sort of the watershed moment where a broader part of the community acknowledged that CW wasn't just one of those direct-to-consumer online type brands. The 12, I think, cements the position of CW as a serious, independent, and most importantly, creativity-focused watchmaker that is intent on delivering original, good quality watches at an affordable price. The 12 also reveals clearly where the investment is. Apart from the Bel Canto, CW primarily stick to good, serviceable, but ultimately run-of-the-mill movements. The investment on their side is on cases and dials. That's where the money goes. Does this watch look like a ton of other Genta type watches? Absolutely. Where do we see the similarities? Well, in random order. The multi-sided bezel is going to remind you of a Royal Oak or a Girard-Perregaux or a Zenith Defy Skyline Classic. The overall angular case construction is similar to that you find on a Tissot PRX or the Chopard Eagle. The crown guards will inevitably lead your thoughts to an IWC Ingenieur or a Chapac or a Bremont. The fastening mechanism on the case back is very much Ingenieur, Hublot or Royal Oak. The bracelet, Bulgari Octo Finissimo. Moving outside of integrated bracelet watches, I would also say that the hour markers could have been taken directly off of an Omega Aquaterra. This watch has elements that look like so many other watches out there. And so what? Clearly, this isn't an homage watch. It's not a carbon copy of a Royal Oak, a Nautilus, or an Ingenue at a lower price with the corresponding lower quality. This is a watch that is burdened with the fact that it falls into a category of watches that have a very distinctive set of roots, a clear progenitor in Gerald Genta, and an iconic baseline of reference in the Royal Oak, Nautilus, and Ingenue. This hurdle is greatest when it comes to integrated bracelet watches. The Rolex GMT is likely the baseline for what comes to mind when thinking of a 24-hour bezel GMT watch. But even the GMT isn't burdened with being connected to one designer that everybody knows the name of. One designer that made 2 to 3 key models that basically defined a genre. Nobody challenges Grand Seiko on the fact that a bicolor bezel is a Rolex copy. It's either an homage or it's original. Not so with integrated bracelet watches. Minor details create connections in the viewer's minds, connections to other watches. Being labeled a copy or derivative happens really easily in this space. What I'm saying is you can't really win unless you're Lange and Zöhner and build the Odysseus, which is truly its own design. Somebody is going to draw the comparison, and no matter what, it's going to remind many people of some other watch. To me, though, the question therefore doesn't come down to what or which watches does it look the most like, but rather the question should be, of all the elements we expect from an integrated bracelet watch, has Christopher Ward put all those components, the bezel, the bracelet, the dial, the crown guard, in a way that looks compelling, cohesive, and distinctive? Does it stand on its own 2 legs? Short answer, yes. This is a good-looking watch. It just is. It's also not boring or broadly appealing. It's visually distinctive. It has character. The proportions are ones that many people would think very good with a 40mm case, a flexible bracelet that doesn't flare too much following the contour of the average wrist. It has a thickness of less than 10mm, making for a low, attractive profile, and a bracelet taper that works very well with the case. The case has dial and texture. The color-matched date windows are an excellent attention to detail and another place where they have found the money to not go with your standard sourced black on white date wheel. The colors are interesting, vibrant, and distinctive. Overall, you have a very distinctive design. A sharp angular case and bracelet profile with a very good level of finishing. You have a bezel construction with multiple finishing techniques that is not only technically complex, but visually interesting and makes for interesting light play. The dial is also dimensional, textured, and reactive to light and lighting, which also gives it a lot of appeal. Finally, you have strong hour markers that draw even more attention to that oh so very detailed dial. Add to that the minute details, just like the one with the text that's placed on top of the textured dial. Personally, I really like the look of the watch, but if I were to try and criticize it, I could level a few potential criticisms on this watch, which I think are entirely dependent on the eyes that see, so they're not objective truths. You could reasonably see this watch as a little bit too busy with a little bit too much going on in total. When I spoke about the IWC Mark XX, I spoke about my theory of addition and subtraction. In short, a tool watch that you want to make luxury is an exercise in addition. You take something that's fundamentally minimalist, having only the parts and components you absolutely must have to make it functional as a tool watch, and then you add elements to make it look luxury. If you add too much, you go too far. A luxury integrated bracelet watch, conversely, is an exercise in subtraction. Buyers expect certain elements to be there on a luxury watch. High quality materials, multiple finishing types, applied markers, and so on. But with a luxury watch, you start off with knowing what parts should be there and slowly subtract until you get to the point where it looks like refined luxury and not gaudy luxury. You could argue especially that the taper from case to bracelet is maybe a teeny bit too aggressive. The Swish logo is not to everybody's tastes. The crown guards are perhaps unnecessary and out of step with the more dressy overall lines of the rest of the watch. The bezel with 3 finishings and multiple edges risks falling into the territory of something a master craftsman would do to show to the world how good they are, rather considering if it overall ends up being too much or not. The Aquaterra-esque hours could seem a little bit overpowering to some. Taken all together, the crown guards, multifaceted bezel, the highly textured dial, the very visible hour markers, and then, especially on the titanium models with the super saturated Fume-esque dial, you have a watch that has a lot going on. It is a distinctive watch. More distinctive than a PRX in my opinion, and in a world where a black dial sub, black dial Tudor Black Bay 54, a Speedmaster and an IWC Pilot Mark XX are hyper popular watches, then the CW stands out for better or for worse. I'm on the side of the fence that leans towards this distinctiveness being good. So what are we left with? This watch is really well made. At this price range, there are so many things in this watch that you don't normally get. Multiple finishings, beveled edges, detailed dial, that impresses me. you get a ton more craftsmanship compared to what you typically see in this bracket. I'm not saying that there aren't watches out there, because there are in this price bracket that can do some of the same, but this is a very good addition to the range, and it's better than some of the more average watches in the range. Christopher Ward has also proven with this watch, the Bel Canto, and some others before that they are very capable, very creative, and very dedicated as a team of watchmakers that are forging their own path and taking on long-established Swiss maisons. That also impresses me. The case, bracelet, dial face, markers, everything looks good independently. This overall design is original with some very clear and well thought out design decisions. Yes, there are inspirations there, but that's okay. It's not a copy. It all impresses me. And finally, more importantly, it's a good looking watch. Some will think it a little bit busy with a bit too many ideas implemented overall, while others, the majority I think, will see it as a visually distinctive, daring and anything but run-of-the-mill watch. It's far more interesting than the downright almost pedestrian waffle dial of the Tissot PRX. It's far more harmonious than a double the price Tudor Royal, and it's endlessly more original than a Yema. This is a really compelling option for all the reasons I mentioned. If you like the look, then it's totally worth it. Well done, Christopher Ward. Comment below. What do you think? Like, subscribe. Cheers.